3 months ago, I stood barefoot in the snow, watching my parents and my brother walk up my driveway with axes in their hands. Their breath steamed like smoke in the freezing air, their faces twisted with fury and something worse, entitlement. The same people who taught me that family means loyalty were now shouting my name like a curse. My father's voice broke through the night, rough and ragged. "You stole the family's land!" Eleanor behind him. My mother sobbed into her scarf, half dragged by Ryan, my brother who could barely walk straight. They reeked of whiskey and desperation. The headlights of their truck painted our old family crest across the snow. For a second, I didn't recognize them. I recognized ghosts. They thought they were protecting our legacy. They didn't realize they were burying it. When the first swing of my father's axe cracked the front gate, something inside me stopped shaking. Fear turned into clarity. I dialed 911 with a calm I didn't know I had. I watched through the glass as the man who raised me tried to destroy the proof that I had ever survived him. And as the sirens echoed down the hill, I understood something that had taken me 27 years to learn. The blood you share can be more dangerous than any stranger's hatred. The next morning, people in town would whisper about the Hawthorns, about the night the family name finally splintered. They would say, I should have seen it coming, that I should have helped my brother pay his debts, that I provoked the storm. But they didn't see the years that led to that night. The dinners that tasted like silence, the phone calls that always came when someone needed money, the way my father's praise felt like a loan with impossible interest. To understand how that night happened, you'd have to go back to the beginning, back to the old farmhouse in Vermont, where I learned that love had conditions and loyalty had a price. Because the truth is, the Hawthorns had been cracking long before an axe hit the gate. My father believed that sons inherit the land and daughters owe gratitude. My mother believed that peace was worth any silence, and my brother believed the world would always forgive him. I used to believe them all. But that night, standing in the cold light of my porch, watching the police pull my father's shaking hands away from the axe, I stopped believing. I stopped belonging. That was the night I lost a family and found my freedom. And it began, long before the sound of splintering wood, it began with the lie that blood is thicker than justice. My father, Douglas Hawthorne, used to say that our family name was carved into the bones of this valley. Every time he said it, he stood a little taller, as if history itself bowed to him. To the neighbors, he was the proud heir of the Hawthorne farm, a gentleman of old blood who believed in legacy and lineage. But to me, even as a child, his pride felt like a chain. I grew up under the weight of that name, learning early that being born a daughter meant being a disappointment wrapped in politeness. When I was 10, I asked if I could ride the old tractor. He said, "That's Ryan's job, Ellie. You'll just break it." I didn't realize until years later that he wasn't talking about machines. He was talking about rules. My brother Ryan was the chosen one, the heir, the hope, the golden boy. I was the spare, the silent witness to his endless second chances. He wrecked his first car at 17, and Dad bought him another before the police report even cleared. When he failed out of his first business degree, Mom blamed the professors for not understanding his potential. Meanwhile, I learned to fix fences, count bills, and smile through every family photo like I belonged there. The Hawthorne myth wasn't built on truth. It was built on denial. My mother Margaret was the keeper of that illusion. She quoted poetry at the dinner table, reciting lines from Frost and Dickinson, as if literature could glue us together. "Family endures," she would say, her voice soft but trembling. I used to believe her, until I realized endures was just another word for suffers quietly. When I left for college, my father told me I was wasting time chasing dreams that wouldn't pay bills. An architect. "What for?" he asked. "You can't build a name with blueprints." But I did, and I built it from the ruins he left behind. Every Christmas I came home, the house looked older, the wood darker, the air heavier with unspoken resentment. Ryan would boast about his new ventures, always vague, always one step away from collapse. Dad called him a visionary. I called him lucky. Mom called him our future. I never heard her call me anything at all. Still, there were moments when I wanted to believe in that legacy, moments when the fireplace burned low and Dad's stories about our ancestors almost sounded like pride instead of ownership. But deep down, I knew it wasn't about the land. It was about control. Hawthorne soil wasn't sacred. It was currency. and my father used it to buy obedience. Ryan spent it to feed his ego. My mother hoarded it to preserve the illusion that we were still respectable. And me, I dreamed of taking that same ground and turning it into something alive again, something real. The first time I told them I wanted to restore old farms for a living, Ryan laughed so hard he spilled his drink. "So you're gonna fix barns for people who already own them," he sneered. Dad didn't laugh. He just said, "Fixing things is for men, Ellie. Girls decorate." That was the moment I understood what legacy really meant in our family. It meant men break things and women clean up the mess. That belief was older than any of us. But I didn't know then that one day I'd be the one to tear it down for good. By 22, I was done watching my family confuse pride with poison. I packed my car with everything I owned, 2 suitcases, a laptop, and a stack of sketches that smelled faintly of sawdust, and drove east toward New Hampshire. I didn't have a plan beyond survival, but for the first time the road ahead felt like mine. Architecture school taught me structure, but poverty taught me resilience. I took night shifts, drafting layouts for construction firms, and spent weekends restoring barns for anyone willing to pay in cash. My classmates went to Europe for design residencies. I sanded beams in basements that smelled like rot and rain. But slowly, the dreams started to take shape. After graduation, I found at the old Whitmore property a collapsed farmhouse with a spine of oak still standing strong against the wind. The realtor saw a ruin. I saw a resurrection. I signed the deed with trembling hands, realizing I had just done something no Hawthorne had ever done before I bought land with my own name on the contract. Every morning I woke before dawn to sketch designs on the kitchen counter, and every evening I worked until my hands blistered. The first time I replaced a window frame, I cried not from pain, but from the quiet joy of ownership. The creak of the floorboards, the smell of varnish, the wind through the new rafters, they all whispered freedom. Meanwhile, back in Vermont, the Hawthorne name was decaying. Ryan's business ventures were smoke and mirrors, a digital farming startup that never shipped a single product. My parents didn't tell me about the first collapse or the second. I only found out through an article buried in the local paper. Hawthorne Agricultural Solutions closes operations amid debt investigation. I remember reading it in a coffee shop, my fingers shaking, not with shock, but with recognition. The empire my father had worshipped was crumbling, and the son he anointed as its savior was digging the grave. When I called home to check on them, my mother's voice cracked. "Don't worry about us," she said too quickly. "Your father has it under control." Then a pause. "You're doing well, aren't you?" "Ellie, you always were the practical one." It wasn't praise, it was preparation. The silence that followed was a transaction waiting to happen. That summer, when the restoration finally finished, I renamed the place Willowcrest Farm after the 2 willow trees that curved protectively over the fence line. I painted the sign myself and hung it above the gate. For the first time in my life, the Hawthorne name wasn't written anywhere on the property, and that absence felt holy. I thought I was free. I thought distance meant safety. But in families like mine, silence isn't the end of the story. It's the inhale before the storm. 6 months later, my phone lit up with a message from my mother. "Your brother wants to see your new place. We should all celebrate together. It's time we were a family again." The words sounded like peace. They felt like bait, and somewhere deep down, I knew legacy wasn't done with me yet. The invitation came in my mother's familiar cursive looping and neat as always. "Family dinner, Saturday at 7. Ryan has exciting news." It looked harmless, almost nostalgic. I told Miles it was probably nothing, just another attempt at civility. He looked at me over his coffee mug and said, "You don't walk into a lion's den just to prove you're brave." I smiled like it didn't sting because deep down I already knew he was right. The old Hawthorne house still smelled like polished wood and regret. My father opened the door with the same stiff smile he used for church and courtrooms. "Eleanor," he said, like the word tasted foreign. My mother kissed my cheek, her perfume too sweet, too careful. Ryan was already there, leaning back in his chair, expensive watch flashing under the chandelier. "Look who decided to visit," he said. His grin was all teeth, no warmth. Dinner began with small talk so forced it squeaked. My father discussed property taxes as if they were moral philosophy. My mother refilled everyone's glasses but never her own. I watched Ryan play with his fork, restless, hungry for something that wasn't on the table. Finally, after dessert, my mother cleared her throat. Ryan has been working on a new business venture, she said brightly, something revolutionary for our community. Ryan straightened, confident, snapping into place. It's an agricultural tech startup. We've already got investors lined up. It's the future Ellie. Precision drone soil mapping, you'd love it. But we're a little short on capital right now. The room tightened. My father's gaze landed on me like a spotlight. Your brother's asking for family support, not a handout, an investment. I set down my fork. I don't invest in fantasies, I said quietly. Ryan laughed. Oh, come on. You've got the farm. You've got money now. Don't pretend you can't help. I looked at my father. Is this why I'm here? His expression didn't change. You owe this family your success. That farm wouldn't exist if not for your upbringing. My upbringing taught me what not to become, I said. My mother flinched. Eleanor, please. He just needs time. If he doesn't pay off his investors soon— What investors? I asked. Ryan's jaw clenched. The kind that don't wait politely. Silence. Even the air seemed to stop moving. Then my father spoke, his voice hard as frost. You will sell that land, Eleanor. You will do what's right for this family. I felt something in me snap, the same sound the fence posts used to make when they cracked under winter ice. No, I said. Ryan slammed his hand against the table, sending silverware clattering. You selfish bitch! You think you're better than us because you drew some fancy blueprints. That land is ours. I stood my chair, scraping against the wood. It's mine. I bought it. I built it. And I'm not selling it to bail you out of another disaster. My father rose too, face red veins pulsing at his temple. If you walk out that door, you're no longer a Hawthorne. I met his eyes. Then I guess I'm finally free. When I left, my mother followed me to the porch. Her voice trembled. He doesn't mean it, Ellie. He's just scared. So am I said. But the difference is I'm not running from my fear. I'm done living in it. The last thing I saw as I drove away was the light of the old chandelier flickering through the window, casting 3 shadows across the dining room wall. They looked less like a family and more like the ghosts of people who'd chosen pride over love. 3 days after that dinner, an envelope arrived at Willow Crest Farm. My father's handwriting was unmistakable, sharp, disciplined, the kind of penmanship that believed in punishment. The paper smelled faintly of his cologne. That old cedar scent that used to mean safety when I was 5 and submission when I was 20. Inside was a single page folded with military precision. No greeting, no warmth. Just words that read like a verdict. If you refuse to help your brother, consider yourself no longer part of this family. We will not acknowledge your ownership of that land as it rightfully belongs to the Hawthorne estate. You will regret your defiance. It wasn't the threat that hurt. It was the confirmation. He didn't see me as a daughter, he saw me as an asset gone rogue. I read the letter twice then, once more under the lamplight, just to feel the finality of it. My hands trembled, but not from fear, from fury that felt almost clean. I folded it carefully and placed it in the drawer next to the original deed for Willow Crest. Paper against paper. History against truth. That night, Miles found me sitting on the porch, the letter still open beside a glass of untouched wine. It's never just about money with them, is it? He asked. I shook my head. No, it's about control. My father thinks if he can't rule the land, he can rule the people who touch it. Miles sat beside me quiet for a while, then said, If they come after you legally, we can stop them. Title's clean. You're protected. Protected on paper, I said softly. But blood doesn't care about paperwork. He looked at me like he wanted to erase every line of pain that letter had written into my face. Then we protect you with truth. And if that doesn't work, we protect you with law. In the weeks that followed, I did exactly that. I met with a property attorney in town, had every document notarized, every boundary resurveyed. I even added a security system to the farmhouse, though it felt absurd. Then what kind of family breaks into their daughter's home? My mother called once. Her voice was small, rehearsed. Your father didn't mean it. You know how he gets. Does he know how I get? I asked. She paused. You've changed. No, I said. I just stopped apologizing for surviving differently. After that, the calls stopped. The silence stretched wide and deep, but it didn't hurt anymore. It felt like peace, like breathing without permission. Winter came, and with it a strange calm. I poured my focus into work, designing a barn renovation for a neighboring farm teaching workshops on sustainable structure. My name started to appear in local papers not for scandal, but for skill. The more I built, the further I moved from the wreckage of being a hawthorn. And yet some nights I'd catch myself staring at that letter in the drawer, tracing the ink with my thumb, wondering how long it takes for parents to realize they've turned their love into a weapon. I used to dream that my father would write again something softer, maybe even sorry, but no second letter came. Just the steady whisper of snow against the windows and the quiet reminder that some endings arrive not with goodbyes, but with signatures. 6 months passed in a silence so wide it became its own language. No calls, no letters, no mentions of my name in the town bulletin. It was as if I'd been erased from the Hawthorne lineage by quiet consent. And for a while, that erasure felt like freedom. The farm thrived, rows of new crops stretched beneath the spring light, and my hands grew calloused in a way that reminded me I was alive, not owned. Miles and I started drafting blueprints for a restoration grant. It would fund jobs for local women in construction and landscape design. For once, my life had purpose that didn't orbit anyone else's needs. Then one afternoon in late May, my phone rang. The name on the screen Mom made my stomach twist. I almost didn't answer, but old habits die slow and curiosity can be cruel. Her voice came through trembling, breathless. Eleanor. Thank God. Ryan's in trouble. Serious trouble. I stayed silent. He borrowed from people he shouldn't have. They're threatening him. They said they'll come after us if he doesn't pay. Douglas is trying to negotiate, but they won't listen. I closed my eyes, pressing my fingers against my temple. How much? She hesitated. 200,000. Of course it was. The number hung between us like a curse passed through generations. What do you want from me, Mom? I asked quietly. Her answer came too quickly. Sell the farm. Please, Ellie. Just until we can fix this. You're young. You can start again. The words sliced through me, echoing the exact script my father had used my whole life. You're young. You can rebuild. You can bear the cost. I took a slow breath. I already started again. That's what this farm is. My beginning, my safety, my future. You don't understand, she whispered. They'll hurt him. Then call the police, I said. The police can't stop this kind of danger. Her voice cracked, and I could almost see her standing in that dim kitchen, clutching the phone like it was faith. I wanted to feel compassion. I did. But compassion without boundaries is just self-destruction dressed in kindness. Mom, I said softly, Ryan made his choices. You and Dad made yours. You all decided my worth when you told me I was no longer part of the family. There was a pause, a small, desperate inhale. Please, Eleanor, he's your brother. I almost laughed. Was he my brother when he called me a selfish bitch, when he tried to shame me into selling everything I worked for, when he helped Dad write that letter? Her sobs came quietly, like rain through thin walls. Do you think this is easy for me? She whispered. Yes, I said, my tone calm, almost kind. Because you've practiced it your whole life, choosing him and calling it love. I ended the call before she could answer. For a moment, the quiet felt like guilt. Then it felt like relief. That night, I told Miles everything. He didn't speak for a long time. Then he said, You know they'll come back right. They always do. I know, I said, but I'm not afraid anymore. He reached across the table, his hand covering mine. You don't owe them your peace, Eleanor. I nodded. No, but they'll try to take it anyway. The next morning, I stood by the fence looking across the fields I had rebuilt board by board. The willows swayed in the wind, their branches whispering a promise I had once made to myself never again to bleed for those who sharpened their knives on my silence. I didn't know it yet, but that call was the beginning of the end. The storm wasn't finished, it was circling back, and this time it would swing harder than ever before. By the end of summer, the phone calls turned into whispers that followed me into town. At the grocery store, people lowered their voices when I walked past. Such a shame, I overheard one woman murmur, family is family. My mother's posts on Facebook had done their work, carefully crafted appeals about a daughter who turned her back on her brother during a time of crisis. She never used my name, but she didn't have to. In a small town, everyone already knew the story, or at least the version she and my father wanted them to know. Then came the article. The local paper ran a piece about the Hawthorne legacy strained by internal dispute. The writer quoted my father saying, "Our family's future is tied to this land, and it breaks my heart to see selfishness destroy it." He didn't mention the debt or the threats or the letter that told me I wasn't family anymore. He just painted me as the villain, the ungrateful daughter who let her brother suffer. Miles read it out loud over breakfast, his voice tight with disbelief. "They're setting you up," he said. I shrugged even though my stomach churned. They've always been better at storytelling than truth. That night, the farm felt different. The crickets went silent too early, the air thick with that kind of tension that makes you double-check the locks. Around midnight, headlights swept across the windows. My heart pounded as a car slowed at the gate, idled, then pulled away. I didn't sleep after that. A week later, I got a letter from the county property office. It was a copy of a petition for joint ownership review signed by none other than Douglas Hawthorne. He had actually filed a claim asserting that Willow Crest was ancestral land wrongfully withheld. It was absurd, and the paperwork wouldn't hold up for a minute, but it wasn't about legality. It was about intimidation. Miles handled it calmly, calling our lawyer the same day. "They're trying to scare you into giving up," he said. "Classic bully tactic." I tried to believe that, but bullies with power and history can turn fear into folklore. And in towns like ours, reputation carries more weight than law. A few days later, Ryan made his move. He posted a photo of the old Hawthorne house with a caption, "Hard to rebuild a family when greed burns every bridge." Hundreds of likes, dozens of comments, most from people we'd grown up with. They told him to stay strong, called him the real heir. That was when I realized what this really was. It wasn't a family crisis. It was a campaign. My father was using the one weapon I couldn't outbuild: public shame. Instead of retaliating, I went quiet. I hired a media attorney to send cease and desist letters. I registered the farm under a private trust in my name. I even added cameras along the fence line. When Mrs. Ada Porter dropped by one afternoon with homemade pie, she found me installing motion lights. She watched for a while, then said, "Your daddy's pride will drown him before the law does." I smiled weakly. "He's not the drowning type." She nodded. "Then he'll take the boat down with him." By September, the tension was suffocating. Every phone ring made my pulse race. Miles started sleeping over more often, just in case. Still, the silence from my parents stretched like a noose, tight enough that you could almost hear it creak. Then one gray morning, a letter arrived with no return address. Inside, in my father's harsh handwriting, were 5 words that turned my blood cold. "You will regret your defiance." It wasn't a threat anymore, it was a promise. And I knew the next time they came to my land, they wouldn't bring words, they'd bring weapons. It was the first heavy rain of October when my phone lit up with my mother's name again. I almost ignored it, but something inside me, the ghost of obligation, maybe made me swipe. Her voice came through uneven and frantic. "Ellie, please, your father wants to talk." Before I could answer, his voice replaced hers, sharp and commanding. "You've got 30 minutes to listen before I hang up for good." "Then you'd better make it worth my time," I said. He took a breath, slow and theatrical. "Your brother's in danger. You think this is just money. It's life and death." "I've heard that song before," I said. "This time it's real. The investors aren't bluffing. They know where we live." "And whose fault is that, Dad? Maybe Ryan shouldn't have borrowed from criminals." "You don't talk to me like that," he roared. "You wouldn't even have that farm without me." "You used my reputation to get that loan. Don't think I don't know it." "I didn't need your name," I said quietly. "I used my work." He laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. You wouldn't even know how to swing a hammer if I hadn't taught you." "You taught me how to obey," I said. "The rest I learned by surviving." There was silence for a moment, the kind that hums before a storm. Then Ryan's voice came through, slurred and desperate. "Ellie, please. They're serious this time. They said they'll come after Mom and Dad if I don't pay. You don't want that on your conscience, do you?" My pulse quickened, but I forced my voice steady. "I'm not paying for your mistakes again." "It's not about mistakes, it's about blood," he shouted. "Blood isn't a credit line, Ryan. It's not collateral." I could hear him slam something in the background. My mother was crying again. My father said coldly, "So that's it then. You'd let your brother die just to keep your precious little farm?" "No," I said, my voice low and shaking. I'd let him face the world the same way I did alone, with no one to rescue him. That's called growing up. For a long moment, there was nothing but the sound of rain hitting their roof through the phone. Then my father's voice dropped quiet and venomous. "You'll regret this, Eleanor. You think you're better than us, but when your luck turns, and it will, you'll crawl back and there won't be anyone left to take you in." I almost smiled. "That's the difference, Dad. I don't crawl." He hung up first. I stared at the screen until it went black, then placed the phone face down on the table like a closing coffin lid. Miles was watching from the doorway. "They're escalating," he said softly. "I know. They'll come in person next time." "I know that too." He stepped closer. "Then you need to be ready." I nodded. "I already am." That night, I walked the perimeter of the farm under the cold October drizzle, the motion lights flickering to life as I passed. Each beam of light revealed the land I'd fought for, the fields, the barn, the house I'd rebuilt board by board. It wasn't just property. It was proof that I could exist beyond the limits they set for me. When the wind howled through the trees, I almost thought I heard my father's voice again, echoing that old mantra of his, "A daughter's duty is to protect the family name." But the truth was simpler now. My duty wasn't to preserve a name that had become a curse. My duty was to make sure it ended with me. It started with headlights carving through the fog like a knife. I was at my drafting table sketching out roof elevations when the beams flooded across the front porch and froze there. Midnight. No one ever drove this far out at midnight. For a moment, I thought it was Miles. Maybe he couldn't sleep and wanted to surprise me. But then I heard it. The truck door slammed, heavy boots crunching through gravel, a man's voice shouting over the wind. "Eleanor, open the damn door." My father. The next voice was slurred, wild. "You can't hide from us forever, Ryan." My heart clenched as I moved toward the window. I peeked through the curtain just as another door opened on the passenger side. My mother stepped out slowly, soaked in rain, clutching something under her coat. Behind her, Ryan lifted an axe from the truck bed, and my father followed carrying another. The headlights caught the blades and threw a flash of silver across the yard. For a second, I couldn't breathe. I told myself it wasn't real, this couldn't be happening. But then I heard the sound of metal hitting wood, the front gate splintering under my father's first swing. "Dad!" I shouted through the window, my voice shaking. "Stop! What are you doing?" He swung again, eyes wild, teeth clenched. "Taking back what you stole." Ryan staggered forward, shouting over the storm. "You think you're better than us. You think that house makes you something." Behind them, my mother sobbed, "Douglas, please, please stop." But she didn't move to stop him. She never did. I grabbed my phone and dialed 9111, my voice trembling as I whispered the address. "They're my parents," I said to the dispatcher. "They have axes. They're destroying my gate. Please hurry." The operator's calm voice bled through the chaos. "Stay inside. Lock your doors. Do not engage." But the sound outside was deafening now. The wooden fence cracking, Ryan shouting my name, my father yelling something about family honor. Every word felt like a blow. They reached the porch within minutes. The motion lights flickered on, throwing their faces into sharp relief. My father's eyes were bloodshot, his hair plastered to his forehead. He looked less like the man who'd once taught me to ride a bike, and more like something feral, like pride itself had possessed him. He swung the axe again, striking the railing this time. Splinters scattered across the porch. My mother screamed his name, her voice breaking against the wind. "Douglas, please, you'll kill her." He froze just long enough to spit the words, "She killed this family first." That was the moment something inside me snapped. I stopped being scared. I stopped being their daughter. I was done negotiating with ghosts. "Leave!" I shouted through the door, my voice steady now. "Get off my land before the police get here." Ryan kicked the door once hard enough to rattle it on its hinges. "You don't get to tell us what's ours." I stood there staring at the wood bowing inward, waiting for the sound of it giving way. But instead came the distant wail of sirens winding up the valley. My father froze. Ryan stepped back, panic finally breaking through his drunken bravado. "They called the cops," he hissed. My mother's face went pale. "Douglas, we have to go." But he just stood there panting, the axe trembling in his hand. The sirens grew louder, closer, flashing red and blue across the trees. Finally, he dropped the weapon. It hit the porch with a hollow thud. When the police arrived, I opened the door and pointed silently toward the yard. My parents stood in the rain, soaked and shivering, the truck's headlights still burning behind them. Ryan was yelling something incoherent about saving the family name. The officer cuffed my father first. He didn't fight. He just stared at me, eyes, empty expression unreadable. And in that strange, broken moment, I realized he wasn't angry anymore. He was defeated. As they led him toward the car, I stepped onto the porch. The rain hit my face like glass. My mother turned toward me, tears mixing with the storm. "We just wanted to talk," she whispered. I looked at the shattered railing, the mud, the axe marks on my door. "Then you should have used words instead of weapons." She opened her mouth, but the officer guided her away before anything came out. The truck disappeared down the road, sirens fading into the distance. I stood there alone in the rain, barefoot on the porch, the smell of wet earth and gasoline thick in the air. That was the night the Hawthorne legacy ended, not with a will, not with a death, but with an axe. The next morning dawned gray and brittle like the world was holding its breath. I hadn't slept. The porch was still littered with splinters and muddy boot prints, and a faint dent on the door showed where Ryan had kicked it. The silence after violence is its own kind of haunting. The only sound was the slow drip of water from the broken gutter. Miles arrived just after sunrise, his headlights cutting across the fog. He stepped out of his truck, took one look at me, and said nothing. Just wrapped his coat around my shoulders and held me while I shook. By noon, the police came back to take formal statements. I sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug that had gone cold an hour earlier. Officer Reynolds, the same man who used to pull us kids over for speeding in high school, looked down at his notepad, clearly wishing he was anywhere else. "We have enough to file charges," he said carefully. "Trespassing, property damage, attempted assault. Your father and brother are both being held in county jail pending arraignment. Your mother, well, she's been released for now." I nodded. They were drunk. "Your father's blood alcohol level was twice the limit," he said quietly. "Ryan's was worse. You're lucky they didn't have time to get through that door." Lucky? The word didn't fit. Nothing about this felt like luck. It felt like a chapter finally closing on something rotten. When he left, I stared at the empty chairs across from me. The places where my parents had once sat, where I'd spent a lifetime learning to shrink myself. Now those seats were empty, and the air didn't ache anymore. 2 weeks later came the court date. I sat in the back row, watching my father stand before the judge in his faded brown jacket, the same one he used to wear to town meetings, the one that smelled of sawdust and pride. His hands shook slightly as he pleaded no contest to trespassing and destruction of property. Ryan followed defiant at first, then deflated when the judge listed the charges: 6 months in county jail plus restitution for damages. My father's sentence was lighter, 18 months probation and a fine, but the humiliation landed harder than prison ever could. My mother sat between them, a shell of herself. Eyes, red hands clasped so tight they trembled. She looked back at me once as if searching for the girl she'd raised, the one who used to forgive everything. But that girl had left the courtroom long before the gavel came down. Outside, reporters were waiting, local ones hungry for the story of a family's public unraveling. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. The facts spoke louder than anything I could say. The daughter they'd called selfish had become the only adult in the room. That night, Miles opened a bottle of wine neither of us really tasted. "You did the right thing," he said. "It doesn't feel like it," I admitted. "It feels like I burned down my family." He leaned forward, his gaze steady. "No, they built the fire. You just stopped standing in it." I wanted to believe him. I really did. But part of me still ached for what could never be fixed, the version of my parents I'd invented as a child, the ones who were supposed to protect, not destroy. A week later, I got a letter from my mother, handwritten, shaky. "Please drop the charges. Your father is sick. He didn't mean it. We just need help getting through this." I didn't reply. Instead, I folded the letter and placed it in the same drawer as the first one, the ultimatum. 2 pieces of paper bookends of a story that had finally told itself. For the first time in years, the Hawthorne name was in the papers for something real. Justice. Consequence. And as much as it hurt, I knew this was the only ending that ever made sense. Winter came early that year, as if the cold itself wanted to erase what had been done. The headlines faded, the gossip softened, and the Hawthorne name, once spoken like royalty in that town, became a quiet warning. My father's business license was revoked after the trial. He sold the last parcel of family land to pay court fines and restitution. When the auctioneer's hammer fell, I heard about it through a neighbor. "They had to let it go," she said. "Even the house. The old farmhouse, the one I grew up in, was gone." My parents moved into a 2-bedroom apartment on the edge of town, a place where the walls were thin and the heat never quite reached the corners. My mother called once, just once after they moved. I almost didn't answer, but something curiosity pity, maybe the ghost of duty, made me press accept. Her voice was softer than I remembered. I thought you should know your father's not well. What kind of not well? His heart. The stress, the drinking, the humiliation it's catching up. I let the silence stretch until she added, he keeps asking about you. The words hit me harder than I wanted them to. For a second, I saw him as he'd been years ago, younger proud, calling me pumpkin when he lifted me onto the tractor. That memory vanished quickly under the weight of what came after. He made his choices, Mom, I said. So did I, she whispered. And I was wrong, Ellie. I thought keeping peace was love. I thought loyalty meant silence. I see now it just meant helping him hurt you. For the first time, there was no defensiveness in her voice, no excuses. Just truth. But truth doesn't always heal. Sometimes it just makes the scars ache louder. He's still your father, she said quietly. Would you at least visit him? He wants to see you before... Her voice trailed off. Before what? We both knew. I almost said yes. Then I remembered that night, the headlights, the axes, the sound of my name turned into a weapon, and the guilt turned to resolve. Tell him I hope he finds peace, I said. But he won't find it here. She cried softly, thanked me anyway, and hung up. I didn't know it then, but that would be the last time I ever heard her voice. 2 months later, Mrs. Porter knocked on my door, holding a folded newspaper. It's your folks, she said gently. They had to sell the apartment, couldn't afford the rent. I heard they moved in with Ryan and that wife of his, all of them under one roof fighting over bills. Poetic justice doesn't always wear gold. Sometimes it lives in cramped rooms and late-night arguments over nothing left to lose. I thanked her, took the paper, and read the small paragraph announcing Douglas and Margaret Hawthorne's bankruptcy filing. There was no anger left in me, no triumph, just the hollow kind of peace that follows exhaustion. Weeks later, a letter arrived. My father's handwriting still rigid but slower now. I read it twice before I understood what it was, not an apology, not really, but a confession. I thought legacy was land. I thought power came from ownership, but now I see I owned nothing that mattered. You were right to leave. Take what's left of the Hawthorne name and build something better. I folded the letter and slid it into the drawer with the others. 3 letters. 3 generations of wrongs reduced to ink and paper. Outside, the snow began to fall again, coating the fields in silence. I watched it from the porch, thinking how strange it was that endings could look so clean. The wind carried no ghosts now, just the quiet truth of what justice really feels like when it finally arrives. Not victory, but peace earned the hard way. Spring arrived late that year, cautious and slow, as if the world was waiting to see if I'd survived winter. I had. Barely. The snow melted in hesitant patches, revealing the first blades of green near the barn, the earth still scarred from the tire tracks and chaos of months past. But under that damage, life was growing again. It always does. Willow Crest had become more than land, it was healing in progress. I rebuilt the front gate myself, plank by plank, the rhythmic sound of hammer against wood, drowning out the ghosts in my head. Miles was there most days, quiet but steady, helping when I asked, watching when I didn't. Sometimes that's all love needs, to be a witness, not a rescue. When the last nail went in, I hung a small brass plate on the new fence. It didn't say Hawthorne, it said Eleanor's Farm. For the first time, my name stood alone without apology. A month later, I launched the Hawthorne Renewal Initiative, a program that offered architectural internships to women in rural New England who'd survived domestic or financial abuse. I used the settlement money my parents had been ordered to pay for property damages as seed funding. Poetic in a way, their destruction financing something that built hope. Within weeks, the local news picked it up. From victim to visionary, one headline read, I didn't like the word victim, but I understood why they used it. Americans love redemption stories, especially when justice doesn't come from vengeance but from transformation. The first morning of the program, I met 6 women who would work alongside me. They were all different ages, each carrying a story in her posture. I told them what I wished someone had told me years ago. No one gets to inherit your worth. You build it with your own hands. As the days turned longer, so did the laughter around the farm. The barn filled with sketches and blueprints, the scent of sawdust mixing with wild lilacs. For the first time in years, the place didn't echo with absence. It hummed with purpose. One afternoon, Mrs. Porter stopped by with a pie and her usual blunt wisdom. She stood at the edge of the field, watching the women work. "You rebuilt it," she said. "Not the house the whole damn story?" I smiled. "Guess I had to burn the old one first." She nodded. "That's how some seeds open. Fire's not always the end." A few weeks later, Miles knelt beside the apple tree we'd planted together the previous spring. The sun hit his hair just right, and for a heartbeat, I saw the future not as something to fear, but to design. He opened a small box, simple, no theatrics. "You've built something beautiful here," he said, "but I was wondering if you'd let me build the next part with you." I laughed through the tears I didn't see coming. "You want to marry a woman who rebuilds things?" He smiled, especially the ones that others tried to destroy. I said yes, not because I needed saving, but because I finally knew the difference between partnership and possession. That night, after everyone left, I walked the property alone. The air was warm, the willows swaying gently under the stars. In the distance, I could almost hear my father's voice again, less a ghost now, more a memory fading into mercy. I thought about his letter, about his regret that came too late, and I whispered into the night, "I forgive you, but I'm keeping the lesson." The wind carried the words away, and the stillness that followed felt like an answer. Freedom, I'd learned, isn't given. It's rebuilt nail by nail, truth by truth, until the walls that once trapped you become the shelter that protects you. I locked the farmhouse door and looked out one last time before bed. The apple tree glowed silver under the moonlight, the gate steady and strong. Somewhere behind me, a new life waited a wedding to plan a project to grow a peace I'd earned the hard way. The Hawthorne name had died that winter, but in its ashes, something else took root. My own legacy. One not built on inheritance or obedience, but on courage, the kind that finally lets you choose yourself even when blood demands otherwise. And as I turned out the lights, the silence didn't scare me anymore. It sang.